bajitunda. Olonde the one that fits ya. Katikende bajitunda. Olonde the one that fits.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Nile Book Club. This is our fourth book of the year.
Yes, yeah. Actually, no, we might be more because remember we've done 2 this month. Could we be on more right now?
Shall I do it again?
We can keep it.
We can keep it. Yeah, it's the 4th book because it's April.
It's April.
Maybe it's the 5th book. Okay, it's the 5th book.
You could be right. I don't know. What was the first one? January. We did.
We had a carryover.
Oh, okay. Open Water.
We had Open Water, Afterlives.
Oh yeah, Afterlives was the carryover, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Then Open Water, then Tsitsi, and then you're right. It is the 4th book. So yeah.
4th book. Okay, yeah. So it's the 4th book of the year, and today we are discussing The Greedy Barbarian by
Kakwenza Rukirabashaija. Got it. Yes, I had to quickly Google the name and look at it. Yes, and the novella or the book, the short novel, is set in a nondescript, clearly East African country, clearly Uganda, known as Kalenga, and it charts the ascension of a dictatorial president from life as a destitute, poverty-ridden young man into becoming this greedy barbarian. So do you want to start with your opinions?
I think what's interesting, so firstly, this book's available only on Amazon for us, on Kindle. So I read it on Kindle, and I hadn't put up my Kindle in a while. It was nice to have it. And I think when a book has had as much publicity as it has, I think the expectations are then even higher for it. So I went in expecting a lot.
Yeah.
And I also think that short stories are challenging because how much can you include? How much depth can you actually provide? But we've read a short story in our club, actually. We read the Chimamanda Sakura.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I felt like that was quite complete. However, with The Greedy Barbarian, firstly, I think that it's very bold of him to write about what he's writing and the consequences of that. So I don't take away from that and his experience and now him being in exile. But I think to the essence of why we're here, it's a book club and dissecting the story and the book. I felt like they were, let me start with the good stuff. I really like reading about Western Uganda because I'm not from that part of Uganda. So it's interesting to read about, like the Western experience and like a homestead in its simplicity, and also hearing names that I'm not accustomed to hearing because I'm from the center, you know what I mean? Like I'm from Uganda. So that was very interesting for me. And I like that. And I wish there was more of that. I wish there was more world building. I didn't feel like it was complete because the way the book progressed almost happened too quickly. And I had fundamentally, I felt like the plot had lots of holes in it and there was too much showing. No, there was too much telling and not enough showing. And towards the end Rukirabashaija would sort of mention, and Kayibanda was like this, and he was like X, but there was nothing to support that from what I'd read. So I felt like the character development was really like, I wanted more from it. But just before I go into like the other stuff I wanted more of, I also like the magical realism and the way that he incorporated the Bashwezi story. I thought that was really interesting. And I think that's a really clever way of incorporating like history or those ideas, those more traditional ideas that don't ever make it to the contemporary world. But I'll just stop there for a minute.
Yeah, you know what? I echo all those points. I'll start with the good things. I liked also being introduced to Western part, at least the imagined world of the Western part. I understand it's not Uganda, it's not the Banyankore region, but it's clear that that's what he's writing about. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed seeing the names and, you know, battling with them. Bekunda is probably the one I can remember the most. I'm trying to remember her dad, Rukinda Kanuzire, I think that was their name. Rukunda,
Right.
yeah, Rukunda Kanuzire. So actually, the more you say it, the more it's really fun. I can see why they have really fun long names. But yeah, but also as well, I enjoyed towards the end, I enjoyed kind of that revelation of who this was about, because I was waiting for that. And you're right, like, for those of you that don't know, this writer, Kakwenza Rukirabashaija, has been, first of all, he was arrested in Uganda for writing this book, The Greedy Barbarian, because the president felt that it was criticizing him and his government. So he got put to prison, also assaulted and abused and tortured whilst in prison. Then he escaped somehow. Some people say through Rwanda, others say through Malawi, and he made his way to Germany, where he is at the moment. And he continues to be a thorn in the president's backside through his Twitter. So it was very controversial, and I was like, wow, like I'd kind of heard about it at first, and then when I heard that he was making the president feel some type of way, I was like, let me read this. I really want to read this. So when we decided to read it for the book club, the Nile book club, I was excited. I was like, woo, can't wait. I like a good satire. I like, you know, someone really going in on a tough president. But met with a few little literary mistakes. So, sorry, Mr. Rukirabashaija. But as someone who is a critic, as someone who does criticize, albeit maybe a government, so it's much bigger, as someone who does have a value, puts a value in education and so on and so forth, I think he would appreciate, I would like to say, and I don't mean it in a patronizing way, but I do feel there's a few kind of, like Katasi said, few plot holes, incomplete kind of storytelling that never really kind of, there's very little payoff. A good example would be, for example, did he ever tell us what happened to Rukunda Kanuzire?
Who was like?
Yeah, he turned into a drunk, and so, but maybe he did, and maybe I don't remember. And so I'm sorry, the inaccurate kind of review, but there was a few of these where characters popped out of nowhere, and they weren't kind of like, there was never either explained the relationship prior. Like, I don't remember Kimbaga. I don't remember her being introduced as a girlfriend when Kaibanda was young.
Right. Yeah. And then she comes out of nowhere. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Then when go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that as well, and also the confusion with the names being so similar to each other. It kind of doesn't help the reader. So you have Kimbaga, who was the eventual wife, but then you have the one he killed, Kemagabo, I think.
But that's not fair, because that's just because we're not familiar with the names, really.
But,
you know, it's like having Namande and Naku.
No, that's not true.
Okay, fine.
Kimbaga and the K names were two.
Right.
There's, like, I've made this mistake before, and I've been told that, you know, there's so, but it's just the similarities sit on paper. It really confuses the reader.
Okay.
It's, you know, having a character called
Samuel and Samson.
Yeah, I mean, maybe someone who's familiar with that, Samson and Samuel might not be that big of a deal, but eventually your eyes will get all over the place. Okay. So maybe, yeah, like it seems like the critique of the president and the government was the overriding factor and the kind of the craft of writing took a hit. So he even made a mistake on page 60. Sorry, Mr. Rukirabashaija, please don't insult me with your pen.
Don't come for us, please.
The pronouns of some of the characters were inconsistent. Kaibanda, you said, oh, Kaibanda goes up to her mother. Goes up to her, and I know that's a Ugandan thing where people go his and her mixed up every now and then on page 60. So maybe in the second edition, just go through that, because even, you know, she went up and he went up and he hugged her mother, like he hugged, it was making reference to Bekunda, his mother, but that just tiny thing. And again, it's probably, I'm coming across arrogant, I get it. Like the diasporan guy trying to go, oh, you got the English wrong. But it just kind of undermines the great story and message and themes if I'm focusing on that. And I'm focusing on also even Kalenga being misspelled at the end. The letter A being missed out, so it's Kaleng. It just makes me think maybe not enough thought went into it, into the I guess the craft of the writing as much, because again, this is feedback I've been told. All the readers going to be thinking, there's a mistake, there's a mistake, there's a mistake, there's a mistake. Then they lose interest in what you're saying later on.
Yeah, I hear you. And I also noted the pronouns, and I was like, oh, that's so Ugandan. But I'm pretty sure he even had an editor, because, you know, we spoke, you know, you're very good at this. This is one of your fortes in like finding the detail, but it does detract from the reading experience. I agree with that. But yeah, just tell your editor to come back, like, you know, to do better.
Yeah, and I know when I release my book, right, I know that there will be people who go, there's a mistake here, but I don't have an editor. So, and also some people say it's not an editor's job to find, because it will be a proofreader or something.
Oh, fine, it's your proofreader. Okay, fair enough.
But either way, and I mean, maybe all that to one side, was it a good book, do you think? Was it an enjoyable book?
I think that I liked the beginning. I liked what first of all, I'm a bit annoyed because I reset my Kindle yesterday, so all my notes that are in here, my highlights, and I'm not going to access them unless we pause. But I liked the beginning. I thought it was promising, the way that we were following Kaibanda from the beginning and understanding, you know, his background and the small village that he was living in. And I was also curious. I was like trying to get to the juicy bit, like, where's the controversy? Where does it get controversial? Where does it get controversial? But I didn't feel like the Kaibanda that we saw, but that we were shown, even had the potential to lead a whole country. You know, I didn't feel like he had the leadership over the knowledge or just of the wisdom to be able to command that kind of authority. Everywhere he'd gone, he was always caught out. He wasn't sharp enough. He was actually a bit sloppy in his endeavors. So how will he then end up being like this leader and gaining all these people's trust? So it wasn't convincing for me.
Maybe that was the point. Maybe that's what he was saying about the current president. He's saying this man is not smart enough to lead and should never have been a leader in the first place. Maybe that's the point he was making. But yeah, I was waiting. But then when we got to the controversy, I kind of felt it was a little too on the nose. It lacked subtlety, and it was very, very kind of a bit preachy towards the end. And it kind of made me, I was always thinking about, you know, people that do it well. Like, for example, No Violet Bulawayo, right? With her book, We Need New Names, right? So being able to criticize her government and so on and so forth, and the way she did that was very, very good. Like using young kids, living in these areas named after different countries in the world, and so on and so forth. And the conversations they had, the dialogue was very, very believable, right? And strong. Whereas I felt like this could be an example of someone who's using his venom towards someone, and rightly so, but that kind of overriding his ability to tell the story and tell it in an interesting way. You can kind of almost see why, I don't want to blame, but you can see why it caught the attention of the president, because it was like, whoa, this guy is really going for me, like proper. Like, there's no way he could even say it wasn't him. I think there was a time where some people he was saying that, well, I never said it was you. It was obvious, as clear as day. There was little to no subtlety whatsoever.
I completely agree. And I feel like the style then changed. So the style that we started off from, with painting and the detail and the attempt to build this world, that faded towards the end. It almost just became like an excerpt from like, I don't know, some academic journal on African politics.
Yeah.
And I also felt like, come on, my guy, like there's no way that you're not just pointing out who this is about. It was very explicit from the detail. So I felt like it was a little bit, it was unconvincing to say that I'm telling a story about all African presidents in terms of like the universalism of like corruption and, I don't know, coups and mismanagement. This was a very particular story about a particular regime. So I don't know, when I look at reviews online, I don't know how people thought that this book was profound, because I don't, apart from the magical realism aspects and the beginning with the village in Western Uganda, I don't understand like what was there, what was unearthed that we didn't know. It's not like we even got to see the uprising. That wasn't detailed. So because we're still living, the story's being told alongside like a parallel real life sort of, wait, let me pause. Museveni's still alive, the regime is still in existence. So what is it that we don't know, that we don't see? Who, you know, people, there's other critics verbalizing this. So like there was nothing new there for me.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And it's, you know, it's also worth noting that for all we know, he probably had he does have a valid reason to obviously criticize, you know, the president. Like everybody's very, very much aware of that. But yeah, you're right. There was no kind of originality. Like I think the people that do, where he does get a lot of props is bravery.
Yes, and courage. Yes.
And I think that's why he got the PEN award that he got. He got this. I think it's called the PEN award or the PEN award. So that
he awarded him as well. Actually, interestingly, and Titsi is the one that awarded it to him.
Yeah, and she had received that as well. So that bravery and that courage, you can't take. Like I was reading this going, whoa, like, okay, that is brave to be writing it, and you're there as well. So I think that is one of the positives. If Mr. Rukirabashaija, you've reached to the end of this, you've reached to this point. This is something I want to commend you for and him for that, because like it's not easy to be writing in the belly of the beast, right? But I think also there should be some skill that comes with that, I think personally. And I feel like I will look forward to writing or seeing his future work, you know, if it gets on the level of, I hope it gets on the level of someone like Abdulrazak, you know, No Violet, kind of like those allegories that people write that you see, yes, they're making a critique of someone, but they do it in such an interesting way that it could actually be also someone else. It could be somewhere else in the world. but it does. And there was inconsistencies as well. Like I was so confused by the world. I'm not gonna lie to you. First, they didn't have money for, this was before mobile phones. And then very quickly, there's laptop and Microsoft.
Laptops, yes, and Microsoft, yes. And also, yeah,
in a year, there was no phones, mobile phones. And in fact, only a few years ago, you and your dad had to work 3 days because of lack of taxis and it. But 10 years later, you have Microsoft Word and a laptop.
and I was like, wow, what I was very confused about the timing, like the time and the place, and also there was a reference to Solex, like, so Solex are basically like they're padlocks. And I was like, how long has Solex been around for? It's like, I'm like, isn't this a contemporary company? But in my mind, I thought we were in like 1940 something, 50 something.
That's how it started off at, because he talks about the colonial government, right? But he talks about that when, in fact, there was so much confusion because even Kaibanda grew so quickly. He came from a 20, 30-year-old to a 70-something-year-old in a short space of time with very little indication of the time, so it did make me think, what was the time and the place? I was very confused. And I think if he had presented Kalenga early on as this world of, okay, yes, his granddad could turn into a lion or not lion, could turn into a snake. It was Kalkurutsi could turn into a snake. But then also there was his granddad could turn into a lion. I think someone was able to turn into a crocodile or something. So I think he presented that, but I don't feel like the world initially lent itself to that, like that kind of magic realism, in a way that actually the first sentence is when he should have done that. Maybe now he's going to call me out and go, actually, I do say this in the first sentence, but one of the great examples of someone that does that, who did that really well, was Ben Okri, right? In The Famished Road. And the first sentence is, in the beginning, there was a road, and this road led to many and did all this. So you immediately have this image of some sort of magic, this road that leads to this, and it fed many people, and many would turn into, we were led by this cat, we visited by, and this cat became many different kind of versions. And it's sometimes, so you're already going, so in that world, okay, where cats turn into different versions and they've lived many years, he presented to it like it was a real world. So I said, okay, his wife is cooking him this food. He's in this regular village, this homestead. Wait, hang on a minute. He eats people?
Oh, he's a cannibal. I was just thinking about the cannibalism. Yeah.
Eats people?
But that's not magical realism.
That's just regular realism. That's
just real. That's just real, though.
It's not magical realism. But I thought that's what you said, that you love the magical realism, or did I miss it?
So the magical realism I liked was, okay, let me just pause. I feel like I had to be very careful on this one.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
What reason why I'm shocked by the eating of the people, but he didn't just eat people, but he was led by these spirits, and he had the ability to turn into, or someone around had the ability to turn into these different animals, right? And I just feel like the way he presented the world as a regular, normal, mundane world, that actually introducing this later on, it just really confused me. And Gabire was in the kitchen preparing emikado for her husband who wanted to tend the cattle. Where in a regular world, he tends cattle, there's kitchens. You compare that with someone like Ben Okri, in the beginning, there was a road. This road led to many worlds. You go, oh, okay. So when you introduce this kid that goes from spirit worlds and into the real world, I'm already there. Tsitsi, I wasn't sad when my brother died. And a lot of people think that's weird. I go, whoa, let's go. Dickens, let's bring white people in it. It was a tale. It was a world of tale of two cities. It was a world of this. It was a world of this. It was a tale of two cities with incomparable poverty and da da da. Ah, so that's where we're going. Now, why are you introducing me in the kitchen and then the husband in the nighttime is eating people and led by spirits?
Okay, so, okay, I hear what you're saying around preparing the reader, okay? I get that. And I love that you're being very technical because you're right, yeah? I think it's really important to have this perspective. But for me, I guess I want to ask, was this your first encounter with like cannibalism in Uganda?
In the literary sense?
In the literal sense?
Oh, literally, no. Like I've heard loads of people, even when last time I was in Uganda and we went to Ginger, people making jokes saying, oh yeah, one of Baliaba and to like whatever, they eat people here.
Yeah, one of what says kind of thing.
Yeah, I was
Yeah. So then why, if you are aware that this is part of like people's conscious, you know, in everyday life, right? Why did you feel like you had to be prepared for it? Because cannibalism is, you know, from my very little understanding, is very much connected to like spiritual activity. So the two coincide.
Okay, so
when I was talking about the magical realism, that wasn't part of it. For me, that's just like, oh yeah, certain parts of Uganda are known for this, or you know, my grandmother's heard tales. I've heard tales of my grandmother, you know, having to hide when she was expecting one of my uncles because someone was trying to come for her in the night, you know, trying to eat her up, you know. So for me, that wasn't a shock. I was like, oh, okay, it's funny though that he's talking about this so outwardly, because these are almost things that people want to keep under wraps. Like you don't want it out there for the world to know, especially I'm sure like the ruling elite, because this kind of suggests that this is uncivilized. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, I hear that. That's a very fair point. That's a good point. But I think, where was the magical realism then? Because it seemed to me like probably the most magical thing that was happening was that, say, Kakurutsi was able to turn into a snake or turn into someone was able to turn into a lion. Like, but that came so much later in the story, this kind of transformation into other animals, right? That it just really jumps out and it confuses you, and it makes it seem like the writer isn't sure on the story or the world is trying to build. Like, are we in colonial Kilenga, or are we in some sort of magical kind of magical realistic world, like where strange things happen, where people turn into snakes and crocodiles and so on and so forth. There was just so much confusion about the time and place that actually sometimes maybe the magical realism was probably the most sensical thing there. I was like, okay, yeah, you can turn it to a lion. You need to explain to me how you got Microsoft Word in a year's time when you didn't have mobile phones. You need to explain to me. So when Museveni was in university, what he's trying to say, there was Microsoft Word. Maybe there was, and I don't know. But the internet has been going on for years. But I just remember seeing Windows 98 and 95. I don't remember Windows 65. But there might have been. Maybe he did that on purpose. Maybe this jumps in time was done on purpose, because he's a very intelligent, articulate, clever man.
Yes.
And it sounds so patronizing, like a diasporan patronizing guy. So I don't take that away from him. And do you know how many? This is the most times I've gone, hey Siri, what does protalicization mean? Or what was the word? Hey Siri, what is it dotard mean? Or what they Siri? What? So many times. So I learned so much reading this, and his sentence structures were great in some places, but there was a few little kind of schoolboy errors that I think if he ironed them out, and I think if he extended it, and this is the advice I was given writing a book, which, you know, the themes aren't too dissimilar to this. I was given the same advice by a publisher, same thing. You need to build the world a bit more. Let us understand these characters and what's no, shut up, not you, Siri. So you need to yeah, like let us get into the heads of these characters a bit more. So when we meet him when he's a president, right, we understand that he even never had leadership ambitions. We understand what drives him. We understand what drives all the other characters. You introduced us to Bekunda and made us attached to her with her one arm, right? But then you abandoned it and you left her there. And then we were like, what happened to Bekunda? Bring her back. Mr. Ghana does it brilliantly. He did do that. He did introduce characters and then in that same paragraph jumps to a new character. But actually there was always, the connection was always there. They always longed for this character to return back just as we did. And in fact, they gave birth to a son who goes and finds and tells us what happened to this character in a way that's interesting, not you going, oh yes, by the way, reader, I need to remind you, Bekunda had da-da-da-da-da-da. It's almost he's doing previously on the Greedy Barbarian. The narrator wasn't a very kind narrator helping us with this story. He dragged us everywhere that we were like, oh my God, where are we gonna go next?
Yeah. Yes.
Maybe that's what he's trying to say with our president.
This is maybe this is what he's saying. Maybe this is meant to symbolize the chaos of the regime, maybe, and remember it's satire. So maybe there's certain people who believe that they have magical reasons, or that this is their. I feel like this whole bourgeoisie link, right? Maybe there's some people who believe that this is divine. They're being in power, but I think I made a little note here saying, and I'm really happy that we're on the same page around, you know, these comparisons are laughable because they're so similar. But yeah, I don't take away anything about like his courage. Like this is a very bold attempt, but I also think that this is one of the issues with self-publishing. You know, you don't have as many parameters to meet because this is just like something you can do and publish. So I then again don't expect it to be of the standard that you are describing.
Which I'm gonna have to do. I'm gonna have to self-publish my thing as well. And I did read it. Maybe I was very harsh reading it because he's doing something similar to what I'm doing. And I do welcome the same level of criticism and reviewing, whatever, that I've given here. But I just think, yeah, if you're gonna write so kind of confidently and bravery around a subject like this, I think it needs to be done in a very, very interesting, exciting way. That it's a page turner. Going, whoa, this is hilarious. This is great. There were some funny moments, you know, that I enjoyed. And Kakwenza was such an annoying, you know, character, of course, but he was such an interesting character. But I just think there was too many convenient things that were happening and things that just popped out of nowhere. This person who we were never introduced to is now the love of your life. You never mentioned Kakwenza when, sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, when you were with Kakwenza. Not once did I hear that he just, oh yes, Kakwenza was this girl that he used to date. So, oh, is this one of those things where I've done it as well, where you're writing and you're figuring it out as you go along, and then went back to plant that later on. He didn't plant that. We never heard it. We heard he had all these girls that he went and he used to spy or whatever, but we never heard these people, and you're bringing them out of nowhere.
Yeah, I was like, oh no, not another character. But I mean, just to go to your point about the language and the sentence construction, I felt that more with our last book, Nova's Conditions. Like, oh my goodness, like the amount of pages, like I folded, I'm like, I need to go back to that word, I need to go back to that word, had my dictionary out. Whereas with this, I felt like it was an attempt to sound a little bit like more sophisticated than was necessary. Like a simple word would have just sufficed.
Yeah.
And in some instances.
Yeah, I agree.
I was just thinking about the women and how he described them. You know, I wanted more detail. So we know that Bekunda's beautiful, but all I know about her is that she has like nice thighs and maybe a nice, like she's got a nice complexion and nice hair, but I don't know enough about her. Like I really wanted more details of these women. And also just the prostitution, the women, like there was no female character that really stood out for me.
Yeah.
And I just wondered what he was trying to say about the women, and even the president's wife was uneducated and didn't she couldn't speak English until she was tutored. Just they were just like accessories. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that, again, I think the book lacked detail on a lot of fronts, so many more places, and I think definitely the female representation of the female characters also lacked that as well. But I think with that, I think we should give Mr.
Okay.
a break. And if he still wants to talk to us after this, we're still open to it. To interview him. It would be great to get answers to these questions, actually. I think that'll be good. So willing to give him, these questions and see if we can answer them. Maybe it will change our perception. But thank you so much, everyone, for sticking with us, and we'll see you next time.
The one that fits ya. The one that fits ya. The moon, they are gone, say I know she can mash it up. She put it in reverse just to show she can back it up.